Howdy folks, and welcome to another Taste of Gameplay video, this time for the Japanese Tier 8 Premium Submarine, the I-56. I have a lot to say about the I-56, and I think this is going to be a pretty good game, and also a good depiction of the strengths and weaknesses of the I-56. So, with some ships, one might even say most of the ships I play, it's possibly the first and only game I've ever played in that ship, or certainly I have less than 10 games in a ship. But with the I-56, I actually have 120 games in this submarine. So I think I can more conclusively comment on its strengths and weaknesses and its overall effectiveness. So the I-56 to me is fundamentally different than just about any other submarine in the game, with the possible exception of the one that they just introduced, the Surcouf, which is one reason why I wanted to play it today, because I was thinking about the Surcouf. I went back and looked at my stats in the I-56, and a few things immediately jump out at me. I remember that time fondly. I remember having fun in the I-56, and I have an average PR in those 120 games of 1,800 plus, close to 1,900, which you would think would imply that I'm pretty good at the I-56 and that I had good battle impact and damage, et cetera, et cetera. Except there's one undeniable statistic, which is I had a 43% win rate in those 120 games. Now, win rate is always a little bit dubious, right? Because there's so many things that can happen in individual games. But over a long enough period of time, and I think 100 plus games counts as long enough, win rate is really, if you think about it, the only thing that matters in a multiplayer game like this. And 43% is very, very bad. It would be bad for anybody, but it's especially bad because I'm not a bad player. Like, I'm an overall 55, 56% win rate player. I haven't checked in a while. It's been creeping up. So, like, for me to be 13 percentage points under my normal win rate in ships means that whatever I was doing in the I-56, no matter how much fun it might have been or whatever I may have felt I was accomplishing, it obviously wasn't getting the job done. That's especially bad because you can't really say, oh, well, submarines just aren't very impactful, because every time you're in a submarine, by definition, there's a submarine on the opponent team. So whatever I was doing was 7 times to 14% behind the curve versus whatever the other submarine player was doing. The I-56 is fundamentally different than the rest of the submarines, with the possible exception, again, of the Surcouf. It's been described as a submarine leader, a submarine cruiser, a heavy submarine. The first thing that you notice is that it has 30,500 hit points. Well, 28,000. 28,000? I thought it was 30,500. I don't know. Maybe I have this captain spec'd differently. But anyway, it's got close to 30,000 hit points, which is well more than most submarines have. And you can feel it. You can feel that difference, right? With most submarines, if you make a couple mistakes, you're toast. In the I-56, you're not. Also, it was one of the first ships to have this deck gun that you see me using against this Iowa. Do not be afraid, by the way, to use this deck gun. I mean, it's actually quite good. I mean, obviously, it's only one gun, so that massively limits the DPS. But I mean, you can do some okay damage with that gun, especially to low health targets. It's really great for just cleaning up low health targets. I think one of the reasons the I-56 is more fun, for me anyway, is because there's more decision points. So you have this deck gun, so you always have something to do there. Like, you can always defend yourself. And then also, the defining characteristic of the I-56 is the torpedoes reload in 35 seconds. You get 6 torpedoes every 35 seconds. Now, what are the downsides to the I-56? It has terrible concealment. It's 7.1, and there's nothing you can do about that. You can see I'm going to get spotted right here because I just fired the gun when I shouldn't have, right? One too many shots. It's not particularly fast. It's not particularly maneuverable. It has a very low total dive capacity. It's 2 minutes and 6 seconds, even if you fully spec it out. It does get 2 of these emergency 30-second free dive. I forget what it's called, emergency dive. So in theory, you get a total of like 3 minutes for the first one. It's acoustic torpedoes are best described as kind of pathetic and sad, especially after the submarine shotgunning rules went in. So for those that don't know, then for the last at least year or so, there's been a rule change that submarine torpedoes only do 10% of their damage, I believe it is, under 3 kilometers. Now, I agree with this change, but as with many things wargaming does over the years, it is implemented really poorly. First of all, the absolute cliff that it falls off is weird. I mean, obviously it's unrealistic, but it's also just kind of silly. Like if you're 3.1 kilometers away, you do literally 10 times the damage. That's just strange to me. And then the factor is extreme. Like, I mean, I get that they didn't want people shotgunning, but like 10% feels nuts. I would think like something like 30% feels way more appropriate. I mean, 10% is really, really bad. But the reason it particularly affects the I-56's acoustic torpedoes is the max range on the I-56's acoustic torpedoes is 6 kilometers. So what that means in the end is you're looking at 3 to 6 kilometers being the only realistic range that you can use these torpedoes. That is a very narrow range. I mean, that's really hard to pull off, right? And I know from experience, like that's just really tough as I get my first kill. Here's the problem with submarines in general, and this might be one of the reasons why that PR disparity is there, like the 1800 PR and the 43% win rate. First of all, there's this bizarre thing that Wargaming did where they give submarines extra PR. They just have like a PR increase factor. Here you're going to see that 10% damage at work. I'm going to hit this full rack of torpedoes, but they do 10% damage, which is still something like 7,000 or 8,000. So, I mean, it's like worth firing, but the real thing I want to show you here is that, in a lot of other submarines, I'd be absolutely toast. Like I would just lose so much health. Oh, that's why I'm at 30,500. Right. It's because this is an arms race game and I got my max HP increased. By the way, did you know, and sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place in this commentary. Did you know I was today years old when I figured out that when you cap a buff, when you collect a buff in arms race, your team gets 20 points and the other team loses 20 points. I did not know that. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yes. One of the reasons for the disparity between the PR and the win rate is in submarines in general, and in the I-56 very much in specific, you tend to do almost all of your damage to battleships just because of the way your armaments are structured. And you really don't do a heck of a lot else. Sometimes you get a little spotting damage. Maybe you cap once in a blue moon. But in general, what submarines wind up doing 90% of the time is sinking battleships, which is probably somewhat realistic, I suppose. But like, it just means that you're going to get big damage numbers, which is all PR really cares about. But like, that's not meaningful damage and you're not doing anything to help your team. And it's particularly bad in the I-56 because you don't have acoustic torpedoes, essentially. I mean, I realize you do, but they're really, really bad, almost unusably bad. So you're basically using these traditional dumbfire torpedoes and you get a lot of them and they do a lot of damage, but you're back to torping battleships like a regular destroyer. Like it's really hard to land these on cruisers and destroyers because yes, you reload every 35 seconds, but you only get 6, which is great for a submarine, but would be terrible for a destroyer, or at least average for a destroyer. And you have to fire them out the front of the submarine, which is a really subtle but important change that you don't realize until you play a lot of submarine and destroyer, because destroyers can station keep. So they can set up a distance and then kind of mirror a battleship, and the battleship doesn't even know they're there, and they can wait and see what the battleship's going to do, and they can take some time to read the situation. In a submarine, if you want to fire the torpedoes, you need to be pointed at them, which means you're either going forward or you're going backwards or you're standing still, but you can't station keep. Unless they're going very, very slowly directly towards you, you can't stay at the same range. You're either going to be closing range quickly which is dangerous for a submarine, or they're going to be getting further away. And that may seem like a small thing, but it's huge. And it's one of the reasons why I think the Surcouf is going to be enormous, because it uses a destroyer model for firing the torpedoes off the back, which means you can fire them from the side, which means you can station keep in the Surcouf, but you can't in the I-56. So is the I-56 fun? Yeah, I actually think it depends. Like, I realize a lot of people are just gonna be like, I don't like submarines, period. And I get that. But I think the I-56 is very different than most other submarines. And I do think it's more fun. I think it feels less fragile. I think the torpedoes feel impactful. But the fact is, again, that 43% win rate, like, you're just going to be hunting down battleships, and you're not going to be helping your team all that much. I just don't think it's a great team play ship. It's particularly bad when you spawn on a flank that doesn't have any destroyers, because then people expect you to spot, and you just can't. I mean, you're just not good at spotting. You're slow. You have a huge concealment. It's not something you're good at. So I do like the I-56. I pull it out every now and then, but I'm aware when I do that I'm not necessarily helping my team, which doesn't feel great. So that'll be it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.